A Dark Night in Ba Sing Se. Case 1. A Dark Night at the University. By MuffinLance. Read by My Lost and Found. Summary. A missing professor. Stolen research notes. A junior guardsman on his first case. Uncle is so proud. AKA AccidentalGuard Zuko AU. A Ba Sing Se crime noir where, instead of ignoring that Zuko stole a guard's swords to fight Jet, the guards press gang him into joining their Juvenile Delinquent community outreach program. They're going to regret it. Zuko already does. This is the second fic in the A Dark Night in Ba Sing Se series. It's about 18,000 words and 5 chapters. It's rated teen and up audiences, and no archive warnings apply. As always, link to the fic is in the description. And on with the story. Chapter 1. Zuko gets an easy case. Zuko stared up at the ceiling of their apartment. Tap, said the ceiling. Tippity-tap-tap. Zuko, said Uncle, teacup in hand, which was a redundant sentence, because Uncle. Outside was night. Their window was open, and the muggy, dusty air of a walled city in spring was languidly slumping through, nudging the leaves of Uncle's last surviving bonsai. The maple persimmon sat wilting above its waterlogged soil, because Uncle thought more tea was the solution to everything. Tap, stomp, thud, tap. Nephew, Uncle said. The bonsai shook on its windowsill, and one yellowed little leaf fluttered down to the floor. Zuko stood up from his cushion on their low table. Zuko went into the half of their apartment they called the kitchen. Zuko grabbed the broom. "Some people are trying to sleep," he said, pounding the tiles above. "Some people certainly were," muttered Uncle into his cup. "What?" "I was only suggesting, nephew," said Uncle, "that perhaps you should not yell at the cultural authorities." "Then maybe they should stop bringing culture to our roof." A few more solid thwaps of bristles on ceiling sent the footsteps racing off. But by then, said Uncle, as their local drum tower sounded the horn, in a manner not dissimilar to what his nephew had just done. "It is time already. Are you excited for your very first night as a junior guardsman?" "No," said Zuko. But Uncle had rushed home after their tea shop shift and used the only free time he had all day to make a late-night snack for him. "So you are not patrolling on an empty stomach." And Uncle had been up early, hiding in their cramped little closet, ironing Zuko's new uniform between his hands. And it wasn't like Zuko wouldn't be going to the station anyway. Someone had to count the kids and make sure they were all still there. There weren't going to be any more missing posters on his watch. So he helped Uncle clean off the table and used the broom for its intended purpose, and stared into his room, at the uniform neatly laid out on his bed like he was a kid. "Why, Uncle?" Then he poured the dregs of their pot into the worst teacup and took it over to the window. The bonsai did not actually quake at the approach of more tea. This was only a trick of the breeze through its leaves. One foot on the frame. Don't kick the pot. The maple persimmon didn't need any help dying. A little jump, and he still had most of a cup to set just over the edge and onto the roof. The shadows growled at him, like he'd been the one running all over, disturbing her nest. "Drink your tea," Zuko scowled. "It's good for you." Uncle's tea might not taste any better than rainwater, but at least it was more hygienic. The very pregnant pygmy puma was not impressed by his efforts, but he wasn't impressed by her denning on all the laundry she'd stolen from their line and dragged into the roof vent, so that made 2 of them. He dropped back down to the apartment, didn't kick the bonsai, again, didn't empty the puddle out of the chipped porcelain dish it was sitting on either, because it was time Uncle learned some responsibility. With slumped shoulders, he went into his room and came back out, dressed in the proud off-beige of a city guardsman. Uncle clapped his hands together over his heart. Oh, to have the royal portrait maker on hand. Good night, Uncle. Don't wait up. He tried to make it out the door before. Don't forget your hat. That. It wasn't that Ro-cho-jyo was prone to conspiracy theories. It was just that he lived in Ba Sing Se, where the conspiracies were almost always true, and also no one was allowed to talk about them. So when Ro-cho-jyo had found a conspiracy he could talk about, maybe, just as soon as he'd finished compiling the supporting documentation. Wow, Ro-jyo, Detective Keishin said, leaning over his desk, like privacy was a courtesy granted only to other people. You're really building up the evidence there, huh? Ro-cho-jyo was not hiding his list. He was just putting both of his arms over it, and hunching his shoulders, because it wasn't ready for other eyes, and also it was meant for the captain. The evidence. A list in progress. The scar. The eyes. The everything. Investigation note. Scar on the correct side? Carries spark rocks. Who does that but someone who needs to explain any fire started around him? Hanako, signature seal newly carved. No previous signs of use. Investigation note. Entirely uninked prior to first usage on paperwork, this evidence has since been obscured. Calligraphy gets better when frustrated. See attached evidence. Request for attainment of temporary visa by witness needed for official testimony. Form 9999, she. Form following unlawful seizure and destruction of identification paperwork by state official. Copy 3. Copy to be kept by reporting precinct. Page 1, V, page 9. Consulted his passport for date of birth. Turned over Hanako to check the character used in his name. Investigation note. Is illiterate. Is highly literate. Corrected kanji on official form. See attached evidence. Form for request for enrollment into Junior Detective Delinquency Deterrent and Community Outreach Program. Page 2. Does not know how to make tea. Does know how to knock a person out. Has swords. Has an uncle. Yeah, Keishin said, now standing up and holding Ro-cho-jyo's own notes above their heads with both hands as he read. And Ryo was not going to jump for them. This is all looking very conclusive. Hey, Lee, are you a Fire Nation spy? The subject of Ro-cho-jyo's information extrajudicial hobbyist investigation froze in the doorway of the station. His hat slipped forward. He shoved it back up, and by then his scowl was covering up whatever else might have been on his face. No! He spat, as behind him, a pygmy puma yowled into the night. Oof. You sure? Keishin pressed. Because I'm holding some pretty detailed evidence here. A word, said the captain, from his office doorway. Ryo, Lee. Ro-cho-jyo went into the captain's office. The Prince of the Fire Nation, official investigation pending, followed after him, and Ryo was pretty sure it wasn't just his imagination, that the hairs on the back of his neck prickled under the teenager's suspiciously hot breath. right behind him.
"I have a case,"
the captain said.
"For you two."
The captain did not actually break his sentence into two distinct parts. Ryo felt he should have, because he was finally getting a case. But he was getting a case with Lee. Name confirmation pending. And the two halves of that sentence were like the Badger roller coaster he'd ridden as a child. Very far up, then the screaming crashing down. He did not actually scream, just pressed his lips together, over his whimper.
"Why?"
asked Lee, because this was his first official night, and he didn't even have to work to earn his first official case.
"Why?"
asked Zuko, because this was his first night, and who would send a fake detective out on a real case? At least it had gotten him away from Knife and his stupid constant suspicions. Zuko was going to have to find those papers later and read them and maybe have a tea accident with them, or take them to the baths and add them to the stack of improperly filed paperwork that served as their kindling.
"It's not a case I expect you to solve,"
the captain said, answering that question.
"But we do need to put in an apprentice. There have been thefts related to a missing persons case up at the university. The local precinct claims they should sequester themselves, given recent events."
Given that another precinct had just been implicated in making people disappear, the captain didn't say, with an entirely straight face.
"Wait,"
said the rookie officer.
"A missing persons case? Like a missing person?"
He said it like there were specific types of missing in Ba Sing Se.
"We've been specifically requested,"
said the captain, with his usual stoic expression. Great. Not only was this not a case, not only did they already know who did it, and definitely knew they weren't making any arrests, but some other precinct was using the refugee kidnapping case to set the precedent of passing on disappearances to the 41st. This was going to be murder on their case completion status. As the one who compiled them, Ryo knew.
"So, are we investigating the thefts or the missing person?"
asked Lee, like they'd be investigating anything at all.
"You'll do a watch there overnight,"
the captain said. So not only was this a waste of time, it was a maximum waste of time. It was going to take his entire shift, and it would be too unprofessional to bring along paperwork, so he wouldn't even be able to get that done. This was babysitting. Ryo was babysitting the Prince of the Fire Nation, who had just been tipped off to the fact that Ryo suspected him at least of being a spy. Investigating a Dai orchestrated disappearance, alone, with the Prince of the Fire Nation. When he disappeared, they weren't even going to look for him.
"I have a lot of paperwork to fix for others," Ryo said. "Wouldn't Keishin be better for this? He's still complaining about his ribs. A night of light duty would be good for him."
"They weren't even broken," muttered the Prince of the Fire Nation. Ryo should not have expected sympathy from the Fire Nation.
"You've been wanting a case,"
the captain said, dropping an exceedingly thin file on the desk in front of them.
"Go do your case. You'll survive."
"He didn't even say hello," said Mei Lin, keeping her head down. "He's probably too embarrassed by the hat," Taiji said, drawing the long, suffering ire of every guardsman in hearing range of the desk they'd commandeered, and dragged back to plant directly in front of the doorway to the barracks, which remained similarly requisitioned. Song would have liked to be out of here by now, would have liked to walk out that door with her mother, to be there with her as she set up their new apartment. Not to be confused with their old new apartment, which Song hadn't ever seen, and never would, because it was back in the other precinct. That's what she'd like to be doing. But Song was technically an illegal immigrant, and she didn't want any guards having an excuse to take her in. So she continued paging back and forth through Form 9999 squinting for things she could fill in. Who even used these kanji? Had they not updated these forms since Kiyoshi? She'd always thought herself a good reader. Maybe a bit backwater, sure, but educated. But Lee was the only one who'd managed to fill these out all on his own, and he'd done it so fast, she hadn't even thought to ask for help, because she'd assumed they'd be easy. And then Lee had gone home with his uncle, days ago. Just walked out past the guards and into the streets, where anyone could be a kidnapper. Like that was easy, too. Song had self-diagnosed herself with trauma. It didn't help. There was supposed to be a girl coming tonight to help them navigate the many paper layers of Ba Sing Se's immigration bureaucracy. Song hoped she got here soon. Until then, she sat at the desk with Taiji and his little sister, right in front of the door where everyone else was sleeping, and all of them pretended it was about the paperwork and not about keeping up their watch rotation. If the city wasn't safe, they'd make it safe. Together, like Junior had showed them. "Do you think he'll have time to play with us tonight?" Mei-Lin asked, as her personal hero walked back out the door, not 15 minutes after coming in. "Don't call it playing if you want him to keep doing it," Song advised. "Probably," answered her brother. "It's his first night. It's not like they'd have sent him on anything too crazy." Outside, Zuko sneezed. Rocho-Gyo watched him very carefully for sparks. And that is the end of the first chapter. And like I said before, I'll be doing my little endnotes at the end of the first chapter and the final chapter for these. The other ones you can listen straight through. So you don't have to worry about that if you just want to keep going. But for this one anyway, I just want to say I'm so excited to be reading more of this, because I mentioned in the first one that I had read the first one, like Case Zero or whatever, and obviously loved it. Like, MuffinLance is such a great writer just in general, but this concept was so fun, and I was very excited for that. But I haven't read anything that comes after Case Zero, so all of this is me experiencing it for the first time with you guys, if this is your first time. But I'm so excited to be reading this and getting back into it. But yes, sorry, touched my mic there. I'm enjoying this chapters so far. The evidence list. Also, Ryo-Cho-Gyo, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but it is a pain to say, just like in a sentence, like, oh yeah, and Rocho-Gyo did that. It's like, did I say it right? It's too late to tell. We're moving on. But yeah, like I said, I don't know anything, but I feel like maybe this isn't gonna be a simple case. You sent fucking Zuko on it. He's gonna somehow turn it into a disaster. That's who he is. He is just a walking, you're near him, something is going to go wrong specifically for him. The universe hates him, but he literally doesn't know the concept of giving up, so he just keeps going no matter what goes wrong, and it's amazing every time. And I'm very excited to see what goes wrong this time and how he gives the universe a major middle finger and everyone around him a major headache. Anyway, yeah, so that is all for this chapter. If you have enjoyed it so far, make sure to go to the original fic in the description. You can always find it there. Go leave a kudos, go leave a comment, whatever you can so far. Say you're excited, whatever. I'm sure the original author appreciates it. And yes, that is all for this time. I will see you next time.